What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here, and today we're going to take a look at my favorite ways of brewing espresso. Now before we jump into this video, I need you to understand that whatever rules, whatever conventions, whatever parameters that you're used to when you're approaching your espresso, they just need to be put in a little box. We're eschewing them. They're gone. They don't matter. Throw it out the window. There can be a plethora of ways of pulling espresso on your machine that are delicious, that fall well outside that range. For those of you who have watched quite a few of my videos, you know that I have not been ashamed of the fact that filter is my first love. It's what has always been my preference. Yes, I do a lot of things with espresso, but that's A, the majority of you all drink espresso, and B, I really enjoy collecting data on espresso. It's a much more intricate process as far as what is unknown, and it's more difficult and more global. But things change, and well, let's just say that I believe espresso is probably neck and neck now with filter coffee. Another thing that is no secret is my obvious bias or affinity towards really lightly roasted coffees. Now I am one that you just grab a handful of green coffee beans, toss them in the air and hit them with a hairdryer. I like no bitterness. I want florality. I want acidity, but nothing that's gonna, melt my stomach. I want this cacophony of flavor that is polluting my palate in a way that makes me want to sing. That being said, I have always been more than capable of objectively measuring and understanding and grading darker roasted coffees, things that are not necessarily in my preference range, but things that set in front of me. And that's because working in coffee as long as I have worked with shops and worked in shops that used really dark coffees that are maybe commodity grade as opposed to specialty. So I have kind of the experience to be able to take my preferences out in order to objectively kind of judge something. So in today's video, very, very simply, we're going to look at the two ways I pull espresso and what kind of qualifications there are for the beans that I use for those, as well as just how you can potentially recreate that at home. Now, as you notice, I am using a decent espresso machine, not cheap, bougie AF, but the reason I'm using this is so I can have one machine to do it. It's also, honestly, that it gives me really nice shots based off of the profiles I'll be using. And in fact, one of them, the profile can only truly be obtained on a decent right now because it has a cool water inlet at the group head. Single boiler machines, you can open the steam wand, let water go out during the shot, and you can change kind of the temperature and the flow rate going through the group head. That is an awesome hack that you don't have on dual boiler machines. If you have a Breville machine, they have built-in pre-infusion based off of a potentiometer that is connected to the vibratory pump, which gives you the capability of messing around with pre-infusion at different pump pressures. Something like a DeLonghi Stilosa or others have no solenoid valve, which allows you to turn the shot off without losing pressure in the puck, allowing you to bloom. I am using the Decent, which very few of you have, and it's going to make you think, oh, I can't recreate this. But I will show you some hacks that will work on some of these machines, though not everything, because some things have the capability of being hacked that others simply do not. I've been very much against flat 9-bar machines for a while now. I think that they definitely should be obsolete, but that's what the majority are, and that's where we're at in our current landscape. So that's what we're gonna have to deal with. But essentially, when you have a machine that has 9-bar and it has a high flow rate as well, you're really limited onto what you can do. Now, I don't like low flow rate machines either, but at least you have a little flexibility because you're able to override the system by grinding a bit coarser, and the machine simply won't be able to hit 9-bar. But with a low flow rate, that's not as big of a deal. Say you have 4 milliliters a second coming out of your machine. That means it's going to top out at a 4 millisecond flow rate, maybe more like a 3.5. And so even if you're not hitting the pressure, you're not just gushing at like 8 mils a second, which some of these machines can do, like a Linear Mini or something like that. I do like high flow rate for a fast fill rate, but near the end of the shot, I don't necessarily want such a high flow rate if I'm trying to emulate other machines. I like, on the one hand, what's called the ultra low contact or the low contact recipes, which are created by username LongPVO on the Decent Discord. He's created these wonderful shots that were kind of inspired by the X Dose, if anyone's familiar with that, to make it more essentially repeatable and, in my opinion, a lot tastier. And on the other hand, I like to use a typical spring lever style profile. So something that has a high kind of initial ramp up of pressure and then kind of goes down after maybe a little pre-infusion, maybe like a low pressure around 2 bar or so after you kind of pelt the puck, and then raises up and it cascades down. So with the former, I use ultralight coffees. I find that they really shine on this profile. So that's when I want something that's a bouquet of flowers. I want a nectar-like body. I want something that is sweet and balanced and just absolutely mouth-watering and something I can kind of savor as far as the different layers of complexity. When I want something that is more of that romanticized understanding of an Italian espresso, which, again, I don't really find in Italy, but that idea of chocolates and toffee and caramel and that nice bitterness that actually sits well on your tongue, that's not astringent, that's not biting, that has that really thick, syrupy, molasses-like texture, I go with darker roasted coffee and a spring lever style profile. But let's go ahead and pull one of the low contact shots. I do have a 49 millimeter group in here, but I'm going to be dosing 15 grams, which is equivalent to about 21 grams in a 58. But I use 49 for the daily. So if we're talking about how I brew, there we are. So the low contact recipe, it's a bit overcomplicated to kind of explain. In fact, I reached out to Long himself and asked, what was your inspiration for this? Can you give me what kind of inspired you to go to where you were with this? And honestly, his response was actually over my head. I mean, he's an engineer. He's a brilliant guy. And he hacked the machine, like went around. He did some magic, some crazy stuff in here in order to make it work. But the long and short of it is we're doing aggressively low temperatures. So it starts off at around 83 or so degrees Celsius for the initial fill, which goes really quickly. And then there's like a second pause, and then you're just kind of yeeting through at about 4 or 5 mils a second in order to finish the shot relatively quickly, under 15 seconds. And the rest of that shot is around 65 degrees Celsius. Even at like a 1 to 2.5 ratio with an ultralight coffee, you can get extractions of 18 to 21% without issue. And I find that's kind of the ideal range I want my ultralight coffees to be in order for them to not have that bitterness, to have really nice balance, really nice sweetness, acidity, presentation, everything. Turbo shots are essentially a sub 20-second shot where you're kind of maxing out your pressure at about 6 bar. Now, I made some years ago a video on turbo shots, and I never was really that big of a fan of turbo shots unless I was overly updosing, so around 20 or above grams. Even though a lot of people love it at the 15, 16 gram area, I always found the acidity was way too sharp and harsh in 58 millimeter baskets, and I just was never that big of a fan of it. I was skeptical of trying these profiles because I don't like that lemon harsh acidity, but surprisingly, this does not give me it. In addition to that, I would get very low bodies with that turbo shot style, and with these, I'm able to get a much more nectar-like body, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So it's different than a traditional style thick, 1 to 2 ratio Italian style shot that is kind of like that thick foam that kind of floats on your tongue and almost doesn't feel like it's there with a nice heavy body. This is like nectar through and through, not much crema at all, if any, and it tastes fantastic. There are 3 steps to this shot. So the first step is 83.5 degrees Celsius. It's 12 milliliters a second. So essentially, as fast as this pump can pump it out, it's yeeting that puck is like a water hammer, right? So it's coming out as fast as possible to fill it up. And it only really lasts a couple of seconds. It moves to the next step once it hits 1.5 bar of pressure. So in the decent, you can say move on to the next step once X or Y happens. So with this step, once there's enough water in there and enough back pressure based off the resistance of your grounds, as it hits 1.5 bar, it moves to the next step, which is the soak. Now the soak only lasts for a second, so it's kind of like a 1 second bloom. Unless there's already 20 grams in your cup. Now you're thinking, oh my God, how's there 20 grams after that initial fill? Well, you're grinding pretty coarse and you're going really fast on the shot. So it can happen. And this is at 63.5 degrees Celsius. Then you move to that third phase, which is percolation. This is going to be 63.5 degrees Celsius, 12 mils a second with no pressure limit. essentially this is going to come at it hard and fast, and if that puck is not able to give you much resistance, then, well, you're not really going to get much pressure. So usually you'll only really peak at around that 3-4 bar of pressure, but it can go higher if you go finer. So it depends on kind of your goal time. If you hit a 16-second shot, that's fine enough to build up like 9 bar of pressure. If you're doing like a 10-second shot, it won't build up more than like 3 bar of pressure. Just because a machine is 9 bar, 10 bar, whatever, doesn't mean it can actually hit that every time. It depends on your grind size. It depends on the puck integrity. So it depends on your grinder, how many fines it produces, how uniform the grounds are, etc., etc. So as the puck is kind of dissolving, as the puck is kind of extracting, it's lessening its potential resistance. Now there's also, as I said, the low contact, which is slightly different than the ultra low contact. This one also starts at 83.5 Celsius, and it does 12 mils a second for that fast kind of hit on the puck, just like the other one, and it moves on if it hits 3 bar of pressure. The soak is 2 seconds or 20 grams, and it's at 63.5. And then the main part, the percolation part, is 63.5 Celsius, a 3 milliliter flow limit, and a goal pressure of 4 bar. It won't go over 4. That's kind of the goal limit. So you could only hit 2 depending on your back pressure. When you have a higher flow, you're able to get more kind of astringent particles and things into the cup. I still get incredible shots with it, but I find the low contact to be much more forgiving and more easily repeated on other machines. Of course, the temperature is going to be an issue, but we'll get to it later. So hold your horses. So let's get this shot ready and pulled, and you'll see what I mean. It's not a pretty shot. It doesn't look good. It's not going to have thick, like bulbous crema, but it's going to be real tasty. So let's get this pulling. Now for this, I'm using the White Honey Geisha from Sebastian Ramirez, roasted by us on Onyx EU, because it's really light, it works really well in the profile, it gives me like a bouquet of flowers with some sweet eucalyptus, and it's a really interesting style of shot, so we're going to get this pulling. All right, so we have the high flow. It's only at 8. The goal is 12, but it's only at 8. There we have our little peak of pressure to move on to the next, which is a lower flow rate. It's coming out really quickly. We're at, there we go. We had a 12-second shot, 45 grams out almost on the dot. So what we can see here is we have the high flow of 8 mils a second. Again, goal is 12, but you can only do so much. Goes down whenever it hits that pressure cap, as we talked about in that step. So it goes down, so the pressure goes down as well as the flow goes down, and then it rises up a bit once that flow kind of stabilizes. The goal pressure is 4 bar, and it almost reaches that, but not quite, because it wasn't ground nearly finely enough. Now we could extend the shot and have it reach that, but that's not necessary. And as I said, you may think, oh my God, that is so weak, that's water, that's not going to taste like espresso. In reality, it's around 7 or so TDS, and it's going to be extracted around 19 or so percent. I've pulled this shot with this profile many times, measured a lot, and it's right around the range of espresso. And in fact, Andre Ehrman, a friend of mine, has been going around the world on his travels and measuring the TDS of espresso at shops around the world. And this is actually similar concentration to some countries around the world. So this is not outside of the ordinary as far as the concentration. It's the way we got there. You may ask, how the heck are you extracting that high with such a fast shot? Well, it's all about the dynamics of extraction, right? When we go a bit coarser, when we are manipulating all the variables we can in order to ensure an even extraction, we can get higher extraction. So here we have it. And it's insanely good. There's some lemongrass on it. There's that kind of like sweet eucalyptus I talked about. There's lots of white flowers. Lots of jasmine, lots of elderflower. There's like a sweet, like a mango kind of thing going on, but there's barely any, like no crema at all. It's just that the concentration of it is giving it that nice, that nectar style feel. And because it was extracted at a lower temperature, there's next to no bitterness in it. It's delicious, to say the least. Ooh. Good stuff. I find that these are actually super forgiving style shots when you pull them really quickly. And the coarser you go with your grind size, the even more forgiving your grinder is going to be. Most every grinder I've ever measured gets better particle distribution. And when I say better, I mean more unimodal, which doesn't necessarily mean better, but you're getting less crushed beans, less of the microfines that can affect the texture, affect the taste of it on your palate, your experience. And so the coarser you go, the bit more similar burrs tend to be, regardless of their setup. So this allows for that as well, which gives you a bit more range with even lesser grinders than something like the G1. But again, we'll do normal equipment later. All right, let me sip this and then we'll pull the lever style. All right. All right, now we've got our lever style shot prepped and ready. I'm using Saka's Crema Bar, which is a Neapolitan-based roaster. It's one of my favorite kind of dark roasts. That's like proper dark. And what we're going to do is the Cremina style shot. So this is going to try to emulate the pre-infusion of a Cremina, though that's impossible. So even though this can replicate any profile, it's not perfect. A closed boiler lever has like 30 or 40 mils a second pre-infusion from that steam that's pushing the water through, which is a much better kind of water hammer situation than the measly 8 mils a second the Decent's vibratory pump can really do. But it's going to try to replicate it, hit one bar and kind of just sit there until it ramps up to 9, similar to what you do, lifting the lever on a Cremina, letting it pelt the puck, and then, you know, slowly going up to your high pressure. So let's go ahead, get this shot started. Now, it should be noted I did lessen the temperature because I like it less than the 91.5 that's set on this, but for this darker roast, I like a bit cooler, so about 85. So we have the steam pre-infusion going. It hit 8 mils a second until 1 bar was achieved. Now it's just kind of chilling until we decide to ramp up to about 9 bar, which is at that 15-second mark. So it slowly kicks in some pressure as you're pushing down the lever. We're going up, we're going up, we're going up. Missing the cup a little bit because we're noobs, and this is a very narrow cup and a high extraction basket, which was probably a silly idea. But anyway, here we're going. Now this coffee's so thick. Look at that. I mean, goodness gracious. All right, so it's cascading down in pressure, and the temperature is also going down slightly, but it's going to go up to about 30 grams, so just under a 1 to 2, because I have about 15.5 grams in the basket. So there we are, and boom, 30.5 grams. Now this is going to be obviously very different than what we just tried because the concentration's probably 50% higher, probably around 11 or so TDS. Much thicker, much different flavor profile. Wow. If you enjoy dark chocolate, it's like a 90 or 95% dark chocolate bar. And honestly, that's most what I taste in this. There is a burnt taste in it. You're not going to roast this dark without kind of a burnt taste, but it's not off-putting for me. I enjoy it. Kind of like a toasted marshmallow. Anyway, well, sadly, not everyone will be able to replicate this. If you have like a dual boiler, you won't be able to get close to that low contact, sadly. If you have something like a Linea Mini, you won't really be able to replicate it unless you modify it in order to have some sort of control over the thermostat and some sort of control over, you know, different things like that, which is a bummer, but for those of you that have machines that can kind of replicate this as well as possible, hopefully this next segment will help you. I pulled out the old Stilosa, which has been my recent obsession with budget machines because I think it's so flexible and capable and easy to repair and everything. Obviously, this isn't a perfect one-to-one, but it's kind of making do with what you have in order to play around with, you know, maybe normally unobtainable style shots that something a $4,000 machine can do. But we can get a $100 machine to do it, so let's do it. Now, using the chart I posted in a video a couple of weeks back with the 58 to 49 millimeter comparison, I showed that using depth and width, we can kind of ascertain the same depth puck depending on the portafilter size. So I was using 15.5 grams on my 49. That means if I use 16.75 grams on my 51 millimeter, I should have the same exact depth, which means I don't need to change grind size. So we're not going to change grind size, and we're going to see how close we can get. All right, we've got our coffee ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release some of the water from the group head to remove water from the boiler, so it has to refill with cooler water, and I'll have to reheat. Obviously, we're just kind of guessing on the temperature, but we can definitely get it below 90, and then let's just see. So I'm going to run some water out of the group just to lower the temperature a bit. All right, and then we're going to quickly, before the heating element has much time, we're going to get this in, and we're going to start our shot. So essentially, we are going to start the shot. And then once we have a little drop, there we go. I'm going to open this up to get rid. You see, now we're in the full fill phase and we're removing temperature. Then we're going to reopen it. And there we go. All right, now without a solenoid, it's going to keep dripping, so that was messy. Apologies. I probably did the soak phase a little too long, made a little bit of a mess, but this should, in theory, be pretty close to what we got from the Decent. Of course, we're not doing the same exact thing. But the shot looks similar. It ran similarly. The temperature was definitely higher there at the end than in here. It was probably closer to 85 or so. But we were able to remove a lot of the temperature through that steam wand, which is really nice. So here we go. It's fantastic. If you open the steam wand, almost all the water stops coming out of the group head if you open the steam wand up all the way. And so I was really trying to drop that temperature at the expense of letting the time go a little longer. But even still, you can play around with that on machines similar to this. So if you have a Gaggia Classic Pro, or if you have a Rancilio Silvia, or something that's single boiler where you can release tension, pressure, whatever, through the steam wand, chef's kiss. But anyway, that is a fantastic shot. We'll set that there, and now we'll do the lever style on the DeLonghi. All right, now we have our darker roast in here ready to go, and so we're going to kind of emulate, as to the best of our ability, what a lever would be. Now, of course, cascading it consistently is not going to be an option, but we can cut the pump near the end and allow the lack of solenoid and the slow depressurization act as our kind of final little pressure dip. But we'll do a little pre-infusion, and then we'll kind of go through it, and let's see how it goes. So we're going to turn on the pump. I'll let it fill, and then I'm actually going to cut off the pump. So we're at about 10, 12 seconds, something like that. Pressure's kind of cascading, then boom, we reintroduce pressure by increasing the flow rate back into the group head. So now it's coming up. And then I'm slowly going to open this steam wand to just slowly divert some water. Whoops. Slowly, I said, slowly. And there, we turn that off as the solenoid calms down. And we're right under 30. I stopped it a little too soon. Let's see, 29, it's still dripping. 29.3, 29.4, 29.5, 6, 7. There we go, we hit our 30. All right. Now that is some thick crema. Holy cow, that's thick. Look at that. Wow. Wow. All right. So, look at this. That is not a pressurized basket. That's a normal IMS basket. We just went to town on that. So that was a similar time shot, around that 50 seconds because of long pre-infusion. And honestly, it tastes very similar. And the temperature is great. We were able to lose some of it with that steam wand, which for me, I really enjoy as it tapers down to temperature near the end of the shot. Which leads me to another rant. There's so much focus in the industry on temperature consistency. We need it to stay, throughout the shot, blah, 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 blah. No, you don't. You want it to go down throughout the shot. It's going to lessen the bitterness. It's going to lessen extraction near the end, which is going to give you a better tasting espresso almost 10 times out of 10.
So I realized that a lot of the mods that I've featured on my channel are a bit inaccessible, and I want to show you guys what I do when I pick up a new machine like this and what's the first sort of step that I take.
In the same way that Tate Mazer, a fellow YouTuber, coffee guy, engineer, designer, he created a kill switch on a Rancilio for the pump, I'm sure we can do a kill switch for the heating element. If you have a tiny boiler like on the Gaja, boom, you start off with the temperature you want, and then bada bing, bada boom, you can cascade it down by just killing the heating element. I also showed in a recent video with the little gear pump machine that I dumped cool water into my kettle in order to drop the temperature so that cooler water was sucked into the machine. The Me Coffee Apex, if you have one of those, you can change the flow rate down to like 4 mils a second. You won't have the fast fill rate, but you'll have that low flow rate throughout the shot so that it's not building too much pressure. So there are ways to emulate this on other machines to get something absolutely new, absolutely incredible. But I think that's enough for today. I've had like a lot of espresso. I'm a bit wired. I need to probably take a walk, take a break, reevaluate my life as I'm drinking wheatgrass and coal all in the same go. Anyway, that's enough for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed what I do, if you enjoy me trying to make things accessible, nerding out on things, being bougie, being not bougie, I don't know, hit the like and subscribe. It would really help. And check out my Patreon down below where we do cool kind of competitions to win machines. We're currently giving away through competition the Niche Duo. Recently did the Alm Copy lever machine, the MHW3 Bomber, the Flare Neo. Before that we did the DF83V, DF64V, all that good stuff. It's just going and going and going. But that's enough talking. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you brew something tasty today. And cheers.